one of the great theoretical physicists. He's at Caltech. And he and Linda had long wanted to see a science fiction film get made where the most outlandish elements of the science were based on reality, rather than just what the screenwriters could come up with. So they hired my brother, Jonah, to work on a script for Steven Spielberg to direct originally. And he worked on that for some years. And then, because we're brothers, whether or not we're specifically working on the same project, we're always bouncing ideas off each other and talking about what we're working on. And so I'd sort of tracked the development of the thing for years and been really jealous of it and kind of fascinated by it. When it became a possibility for me to get involved, I jumped on it and took the script, and I basically wound up combining it with some other scripts that I've been working on to make it into the film that you've just seen.
And I mean, one of the things that it's so obvious watching the movie, kind of what the heart of the movie is, and I'm curious when the thing that you obviously grabbed onto and the emotional themes that run through the whole thing, that pull you into it, were those something that had been developing in your brother's script, or there's something that came from those other projects? At what point were you first hooked in by, the heart?
Well, the thing that Jonah always had in his screenplay that I loved was this family at the heart of it, and the contrast between the intimate family relationship and the cosmic scale of the adventure that the protagonist goes on. But I gravitated to that at the time in which he was writing on it. He didn't have kids. He does now. I have 4 kids, and so I immediately kind of grabbed onto the father-daughter relationship. It was actually a son in his draft. I changed it to a daughter, I think, probably because my oldest is a girl. And I just sort of ran with that. And I really got hooked on trying to sort of analyze that aspect of our humanity in contrast with the vastness of space, because I think anytime you go out into the universe in a movie or in a novel, whatever, inevitably you wind up examining questions about human nature. You wind up contrasting who we are against that sort of great mystery that's out there. And so for me, the interesting thing to take on was this idea of our responsibility to our kids, the idea of the relationship between generations, that kind of thing. And really take that and run with it.
Well, it really, it's like all the best sci-fi. It's the hugeness of everything is concentrated on this one little point of this emotional contact, and so it makes it so powerful. It also, the whole thing has, including the sci-fi elements, have such a tactile, real feel to them. Can you talk a little about, just walk us through kind of the places you shot this movie and the actual environments that you went to? I knew that.
Yeah, we started with the Farmhouse stuff. We went up to Canada, to Calgary, shoot for a few weeks there, and built a farmhouse on this great location, because what we needed was cornfields near mountains, which, as any sensible farmer will tell you, is a bad combination. So we did our research. We found out that you could just about plant corn there and hope for the best. And in the end, we did great. Corn grew very well.
Did you plant your own corn?
We planted our own.
You did. Corn. Okay. Did you have a big corn feast at the end of a wrap? Did you have? No?
We actually made money on the corn. We did. Our line producer Jake Marzi did a terrific deal with the rancher, and basically
brand it as Interstellar Corn. Did you have like a picture of Matthew McConaughey on the crate?
We did not, but we did actually manage to make money because we didn't destroy enough. So whatever we didn't destroy, we were able to sell. So we drove through a lot of it and the rest. But we actually had planted 800 acres at 2 different locations. Well, it's not as difficult as it sounds, because what happened was, I produced Man of Steel for Zack Snyder, and they had gone out and planted this cornfield and built a house in it. And I hadn't been involved in any of that because I was busy making Dark Knight Rises. But when I realised we weren't going to find corn we needed, I called up Zack and said, "How much can you really plant?" And he said they'd done 500 acres, so it's very doable, because you're basically paying for the seed and the probability of the crop working. And it didn't look like it was going to work. And I was thinking about a rewrite. We sort of went up, and then it took off and grew very fast.
And when the film industry collapses, you have a second career with move up to Canada.
Well, how it is. Every movie you become a little bit more knowledgeable about something you knew nothing about.
So the farm stuff, and then I guess the next thing I'd like to talk about is the interior of the spaceships and the space stuff, and also particularly because again, it felt, I have no idea how you would have done it, but so much of the stuff with the camera mounted outside the spaceship felt practical and very real to me. So yeah.
Yeah, we did. We started with the farmhouse stuff, and what I was saying to Nathan Crowley, my designer, to Hoyte van Hoyten, the DP on the film, is how do we maintain that feeling of reality in the other environments? So for the planets, you say, okay, we'll go to Iceland, we'll shoot on real water, we'll shoot on that glacier, that kind of thing, then enhance what we need to. But for the spaceships, it became about building them in as real a way as possible. So we built them fully enclosed. We decided we would use no green screens. And we looked back at Philip Kaufman's The Right Stuff from 1983 and looked at what he had done with rear projection, front projection, and how that could give you reflections in helmets and things like that. And we decided to apply digital projectors to that. And we came up with a sort of new technique of putting views outside windows. It's sort of based on front projection principles, but without having to use a beam split and that kind of thing.
Was it a huge screen that enclosed it, or were the screens closer up to the...
It was a huge white screen, and then you would choose which part of it to project onto and align it specifically for the camera position. So it was sort of a new technique that we got very good at, very quick at. So instead of treating the projection as a backing, as an enormous backing, and you can use any of this shit for Star Wars.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm taking notes. Don't think. I won't.
But rather than viewing it as a huge backing, which takes 16 or 20 projectors aligned and all the rest, we said, okay, we'll do it just from the camera point of view. So you'd sit there with a laptop, keystone correct, the perspective for the view you wanted, and then so you do it as part of the lighting setup, basically.
That's amazing.
We got very good at doing that, but what it meant was the actors were in something that wasn't so much a set, it was more like a simulator, right? They got to see what was outside the windows, and the craft would react to the things it was meant to be reacting to. And so scenes like, where they go to the water planet and they enter the atmosphere and then spin around in the lab, we were able to run the entire sequence every time and shoot it like a documentary. So where do we get a handheld camera and we would just run the entire thing, and he would grab different bits, and it really gave us a lot of material.
Again, and this is just more R&D for me, so I apologize, but the exterior of the ship shot.
Yeah, we did something that nobody's ever done before, which we built the spaceships full size for use on the ground in Iceland. And then having spent all that money to build these things and ship them, I said, well, rather than doing everything as a miniature unit, let's do a main unit shoot where we mock the sort of NASA footage. We said, where could you really put a camera? And they're always mounted the size of the ships. And because we had the full-size ships, what we did is we mounted the full-size ships on a gimbal, hydraulic gimbal, usually used for interior work. And we've been using it for interior work, and I've been looking at it from the outside and saying, well, actually, it looks a lot more interesting from the outside. So can we mount the full-size ship on the gimbal, mount the camera to it, and have Hoyte light, sun, or the white reflection of the planet, so we would then fly, I got to sort of fly the spaceship according to the story ideas, which was a terrific thrill. The thing weighed 1.5 tons, and you just move it around this gimbal, point it into and out of the light. And then you give that to the miniature guys at New Deal, and they would motion track that and then shoot the miniature element for the distant spaceship, and would comp the things together. And so I think most of the exterior shots that involve spaceships, the foreground, like all the docking pieces are full size. You would do that docking for real and actually dock the things together. It was really a thrill. It was great fun.
It's amazing to hear that. At the same time, it's not surprising because you can really feel it in the footage. There's something about the way the whole thing shakes and the weight of the whole thing.
I think you get the weight, and you get these weird, if you look closely, you'll see sort of, crew footprints in the dust on the ships and things like that, which I don't know whether you really get on a spaceship ever, but, we left those kind of things in, and odd little dust motes and things in the air, because it hopefully gives you some feeling of tactile quality to it. And almost all spaceships, therefore, they're a combination of full-size and miniatures. And then we used CG builds for the very distant views in order to get back and look at a whole planet.
The score in this movie is so beautiful, and I know that I wanted to ask about the way that you work with your composer, with Hans, and also broadly how you guys work together, because I think it's a little unique, and also at what point the church organ entered into it as a huge element of it, like how.
Sure. The way I work with Hans has been different on every film we've done together, and on this film, what I wanted to do was get him involved creatively at a stage where he wouldn't know anything about the film. He wouldn't know the genre. He wouldn't know anything about it. And the reason is, what I found is, particularly on the large action films we've done, because I don't use temp music, I make him give me demos and we just start layering them in as we're editing. You wind up with something of a sort of tempo map on the film. You wind up with a huge mechanism of how the music is working to support the action and visceral elements. And in the last few weeks, he's always stuck with this problem of how do you get the emotion back in that? You know, how do you sort of penetrate that huge action movie thing and get to the heart of it?
Right.
So in this film, I said, 2 years out, before I'd even started writing on the script, so he wouldn't have any idea what the thing was, I said, give me 1 day of your time. I'm going to write you a little fable, you know, the fable of the heart of the movie I'm going to do next. Think about the relationship between the father and the child, what that means, a few lines from the film, from the scene where he leaves Murph. And then you give me 1 day of your time and you write, whatever you write will be the score for the film. You play it from the end of the day and that will be it. And that's exactly what he did. And that is how the score came about. I then said, by the way, it's a huge science fiction film. But he sort of got what I was aiming at, because everything in the film, everything in the music comes from that initial emotional impulse that he had based on what the heart of the movie is, and it kept it alive the whole way through the film. And at a very early stage, I said to him, well, have you done a score using a church organ? Because I'd really like you to do that. And he had, but knew he'd used organs as a child and learned how to play to a degree. But he was pretty fascinated by the challenge of it, and he understood that what we were after was, we're trying to borrow from the aesthetics of religion. We're basically saying that whether you're talking about cathedrals and their architecture or the sound of an organ echoing around that space, that's kind of man's most profound attempt to portray the metaphysical, to sort of address metaphysical issues. And so there's a feeling to that you pay attention. It's sort of very serious. And so we went and recorded the organ Middle Temple in London. Somebody actually play all that stuff live, layers and stuff. And it's an incredible beast of an instrument, but I think it adds tremendous value.
You're right, it keys directly into those feelings. I wanted to ask about the kind of the Red style interviews that start out the movie. Are those?
Yeah.
I don't know. Emma had mentioned to me. I don't know whether I heard it right. Are those actually interviews with from the Dust Bowl documentary?
No, they are. I mean, you answer the question when you say Red style, because it's exactly what it is. I'd seen Reds and thought, well, that's great. I'd like to do that. But I was researching the Dust Bowl as a sort of idea for how to dramatize, the end of the world in the first act of the film. Jonah's Draft was always about blight. It was always about the idea of the crops are failing. But I didn't feel that was kind of visceral enough, and so I wanted to look at agricultural disasters of the past and say, what would that look like? And I came across Ken Burns' wonderful 6-hour PBS documentary about the Dust Bowl, where he interviews the survivors who were children at the time of the Dust Bowl and have these incredible stories, very moving. And the imagery, we literally have to tone it back from the reality of the Dust Bowl, because you wouldn't believe it was a science fiction film. But I called Ken and said, I'd like to mix Ellen Burstyn in with these real life accounts, because I love the idea that you're telling a science fiction story, you're presenting something that people might easily try and dismiss as improbable, but there's a feeling of reality to it, and that's because these things have already happened, and they've happened even worse than we portray them. And the Dust Bowl is an extraordinary man-made agricultural disaster, and that's really what we're building on.
I mean, one of the things I hear you keep mentioning in every single element of it is just striving to stick your feet in the ground, to ground it, and especially especially today when literally anything is possible with effects. That's something that that your movies always do. Is there always is this feeling of reality to even the most incredible things in it. And I'm right now on the fly trying to formulate a question based on this. I'm not just telling you what you do, but I apologize. But no, I mean, how much though, and especially with something like this though, when, like for instance, the space stuff, when the space travel stuff, like the flyby of Saturn, which as a space nut myself was just, it was like being in church. It was beautiful. When it's something like that, how do you approach it in terms of that overall aesthetic of let's make the spectacle because it feels real, you know?
Well, we try to approach that. What we try to avoid in the construction of the shots, and this was something we developed between ourselves, designer, DP, the whole team, you know, and the visual effects supervisor during the shoot. We developed this language of saying, we always want to know where the camera could possibly be for these shots. And then we intersperse that with these sort of God shots, these kind of massive space shots where we're only using those when we have a point to make about where we are, about the size of the spaceship relative to the cosmic phenomena, you know, around and so forth. And we try to never, well, it was a philosophy we first dealt with on Batman. We tried to never, well, Batman and Inception, they each had their own versions of this. On Batman, it was like, okay, no one is ever allowed to say, well, it's just a comic book movie, you know, well, it's just this, well, it's just that. On Inception, no one was ever allowed to say, well, it's just a dream, so it can look less real, look at this, that, the other. And on this, it was like, yeah, you're never allowed to say, well, it's a special effects movie, or it's a science fiction film. We have to try and invest a huge feeling of reality in whatever we can. So trying to always maintain that as it applied to the camera blocking and as it applied to what we did on set. So the tesseract scene, for example, that sequence, you know, where he's gone into the black hole, is in there. That's a great collaboration between the production designer and his team and the visual effects guys, because the visual effects guys were producing imagery based on stretched timelines, based on time slices and that kind of stretching. They would then feed that to the designers who would build those extrusions, and then we would shoot the sequence for real in a massive set that we built, then give that to the visual effects guys to finish off the extremity.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically about the design of that bookcase scene, about the tesseract scene, and I mean, so many times that you write something and then the design of it, when you get to the design phase, accentuates the way you want it to feel or brings it to life. In this, the design of it is literally the storytelling. That visually how it looks is part and parcel of understanding what it is. Did you conceive of how that would look at the script phase, or was it a collaboration going along?
No, it's script phase. I identified the emotional beats and how they would have to work, and what's going to be in the black hole was pretty vague. It was always based on the idea of the books and the
interior black hole, yeah.
Pretty much. It read a little more confusingly than that. But it was always the bit of the script that we would try to take it on one piece at a time. You know, what's the line that has to happen? What did she find in the notebook? Those kind of story elements. But from a design point of view, it was the first thing we looked at. The first day that Nathan Crowley, my designer, came on the film, we built this infinity cube and looked at the way you could get these infinite tunnels off one particular bedroom and that. It was the last thing we finished designing, and it involved Paul Franklin, our visual effects supervisor, involved Hoyter, our DP, and myself. Really, when we were holed up in Iceland, terrible storms there, we finalized the design, and it's based on the story functions, as you say. It's based on the idea of creating a matrix to represent time as a spatial dimension and still contain all of the other three-dimensional information.
So what did you actually build? What did the set actually
The set was, it was one entire cell of what is a tesseract. So it was the middle space where it's floating around in, and then it had a bedroom, you know, on each side and above and below, and then it had the extrusions of matter between these things, and we used an array of projectors because we got very fond of a front projection technique at this point, to apply a moving texture.
So that's actually projected onto
Yes, so you can actually interact with it and move. And at certain points, we have the entire thing sort of lit with these projectors. And that way, what Hoyt did in terms of lighting is he just took the reality of how the extrusions would work, where it was stretching elements of the set, including the windows, and he made these flat light panels that would give you a sort of daylight from a very small space, and intersperse those, and then didn't add any kind of theatrical lighting beyond that, so you could shoot in any direction without flares or anything like that.
Yeah. So cool.
Well, the fun, Matthew McConaughey, when he was floating around, because he was 5 days of being strung up in there, but he said it was his favourite ever set he worked on, because he'd not known, I'd not been able to explain to him what that would be, and he was able to come onto the set, physically interact with it, so he could push on these things and see them react, and then he could look through the bookshelf and he could see Mackenzie was actually there, interacting, so it was a really, it was very informative for him. It was a great creative process in that way, really, really satisfying.
That's amazing. And this is kind of it's a question I bet you're asked a bunch, but B, it's also kind of a meta question in terms of, I am very curious about it. It seems like there was a real conscious decision to not put like Matt Damon's name on any of the marketing, to kind of keep that a secret. And I'm sure there was what was the creative kind of, what was the thinking behind
Well, Dr. Matt always, in the script, it was very important that he be somebody who you have some expectation of. They talk about him a lot. You pin a lot of hope on this guy. And so it was very important to me in casting that when that a horrible thing opens up and he sort of unzips the bag, that it be somebody that you sort of go, oh, okay, that means something. And because it's Matt Damon, you go, yeah, maybe everything's going to be okay.
Nope. That's funny.
I just love the way he plays it, because he's a true believer, he really lays it out, and that was it was a very important thing, I think, to not mislead the audience that he'd be in the film more than he would be by having his name and and all that, and it was a fun surprise for people.
I trusted him. We have a few minutes. I'm sure there are a million questions out here. Why don't we take maybe two of them? Sorry, but they're going to be good 2 questions. You sir in the blue right there.
You touched on it when you were talking about the religion, but many of your films, even going back to even Batman Begins, deal with sort of existential, spiritual sorts of themes, and then sort of reading here, it certainly had that effect on me when I saw it at IMAX. Sort of an existential effect. What informs or inspires your views on metaphysics and spirituality, or whatever? What thinkers?
Well, I think what most informs me on those issues actually is fiction. And I talk a lot about authors like Borges, people who explore these things not as straight philosophy. I'm not somebody who spent a lot of time examining philosophy per se or religion per se, but fiction. And I think that what really informs my views on what sort of winds up floating around the film is actually the process of making the film. And so in a way, each film I get to put a lot of thought and ideas into whatever the interesting questions are of the drama, because I think films really come to life when they have unanswerable questions in them arising from whatever the situation is. And so I try and let that stuff sort of rattle around and let each film kind of maybe expand on what I've been looking at before. I think Interstellar is the most obviously, I suppose, metaphysical film, although Inception, I suppose, pretty much is. I think with Interstellar, I wind up having to lay more of my cards down and say what I think a bit more in terms of the relationship between certain aspects of human nature, life, for example, and the construction of the universe. But it's also raising its own set of questions about cause and effect and what time is and all the rest of it. I think with this type of canvas, with the type of canvas that science fiction allows you, you really get to do that. Not so much in Star Wars, by the way.
We'll see. We'll see. We're gonna get some more heads in Star Wars. You'll see. You'll see. It's gonna be a big surprise. Yes.
There you go.
Are you reading anything good at the moment?
What scripts-wise?
Yeah, Dish. Come on.
I'm almost finished with the James Orwell. James Orwell, so good fun. But no, nothing philosophical. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge with child actors because you're looking for a child who can really be a child and hasn't learned too much technique. And really, to me, it's all about casting. And John Papsner, our casting director, found Mackenzie for it and she just seemed exactly right. And I think she's an incredible talent. My challenge really was to figure out logistically when they have a very intense scene like where he says goodbye to her. Matthew was able to really take care of the emotional side of her. He really had a close relationship with her, which helped enormously. I really had to figure out the logistics of how do we not make this kid have to do this 20 times, fully emotionally in that way. And it was very difficult because we had 2 days to shoot that scene, which was almost too much time in a way because she had to be sort of in that state for too long. And so we sort of figured out how to lighten the mood where we needed to. But I really think as far as, working with kids, it's really about casting. It's about finding the person who just can be that person and enjoy that and has the maturity to do that without having, I think, too much technique or seeming too much of an actor because there's a sort of in-between period where you learn enough, you learn too much technique, but you don't have enough yet. And you have to then grow into that use of artifice more. So I think with child actors, you're looking for somebody who is naturally able to do that. Mackenzie just has an incredible ability to tap their emotions.
Let's go to the back. You, sir, with the beard, yes.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. I just have two questions. The first quick one is you mentioned earlier that I guess Murph originally was a boy. I'm just curious if that name stuck from her being a boy first. Was it Murphy? And then second question is about you've been publicly had a strong stance on shooting on film and everything, and even you've had relied on CG more maybe in this movie than any other film previously. I'm just curious also, what's your stance on film projection? Because we had a 70 millimeter print today, but obviously with projection, every time you watch it's a different movie. There's flaws that come with it. I'm just wondering, shooting on film, you're very clear on. I was also curious what you think about projecting on film.
I see the projection as leaning forward for the answer to this question.
I'm a huge fan of shooting and projecting on film, and it's unfashionable these days because there's a certain point with the distribution networks where they decided they were going to value consistency over pure quality because it's an inarguable technical fact that you get higher resolution, better color reproduction, certainly from a film print. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Anyone who knows the science of it knows that. But it's very difficult to do it well. They've done it very well here tonight, which is great. Often it's done badly. And very often when I'm in the sort of debate with whoever it is, the studio, whoever, about digital versus film, it tends to be around issues. They tend to always be thinking of a terrible, poorly projected, film print, and obviously, that's not adequate. I'm thinking of a very well projected film print, and I think when you're making a film, I don't ever think you should be making a film for the bad theatre. I think that's ridiculous. And that's kind of what we're being asked to do now. We're being asked to do it with sound, we're being asked to do it with pictures. And well, what if they project it too dimly? What if they play it too quietly? And so, well, I don't really think we should be doing that. I think we should be demanding of the exhibition network that they raise their game. And we had a lot of very productive discussions with the exhibition community on this film and got a lot of things done, which was great. So no, I'm a huge fan of film. And it is different every time, as you say, and it's not consistent. But that's part of the magic of it. There is an organic quality to it. There's a real quality to it. It's more like a live performance than a recording. And the price that's being paid in exhibition terms for the consistency of digital is too heavy at the moment. And there really isn't. I mean, I could bore you with the technicalities of it, but there isn't yet a way to improve the resolution significantly beyond what it needs to be in 4K. We need 8K, 12K projectors. They don't have a way of doing that at the moment because the gaps between the pixels are too large. So you can add more pixels, but you lose contrast, blah, blah, blah. There's a million different issues behind it. So it's not an unthinking allegiance. It's not a nostalgia. It's just a better way of doing it where it can be done. And I feel that as a filmmaker, you should have the right to stand up for the way you want the film to be presented, the way you want it to be shot, the way you want it to be presented. I can't remember what the 10 other questions.
Oh, just Murphy.
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 That was the
Murphy, yes.
Yeah.
No, Murph's name always was Murphy, and I thought it fit well with this sort of slightly tomboy character that I changed her to.
Do you know what percentage of the screens that ended up showing Interstellar, what percentage were film, what percentage, I don't know if you know, like...
Well, the vast and overwhelming percentage of screens were digital. There's no way around that these days. That's the way the studios have forced the networks to be. But a lot of our key locations were on film. When I went over for the premiere in London, we had 3 70mm prints showing the premiere at the same time. We've had 10 70mm engagements, in North America, and on our IMAX, 50 screens, 58 screens, and they've done incredibly well. People came to them, they sought them out, and they've really, really done very well for us. So a huge amount of our box office in North America has been from our IMAX screens, which is very gratifying. And I think, the point we were trying to make with the studio, and Paramount really backed us up on this, like Warner's and the rest of the world, is, people are looking for something they can't get in the living rooms, and if you offer it to them, they will seek it out.
Let's take one more quick one, and then we'll get out of here. Let's do you, sir.
Do you find the industry kind of open-minded or